There comes a moment in every empath's life when the soul whispers louder than fear, when the truth becomes heavier than the mask, when the person they abandoned to survive finally demands to return. There is a part of you that you left behind long before you even realized you were abandoning anything. It was the self that felt freely, loved openly, spoke honestly, dreamed boldly, and moved through the world without apology. This self existed before the world demanded that you toughen up, quiet down, shrink yourself, or become someone more acceptable to others. It lived in you before you learned the cost of being too open, too intuitive, too soft, too aware. And although you buried it for the sake of survival, this abandoned self never died. It remains alive in the quiet spaces of your being, in the moments when your intuition whispers a truth you can feel but cannot explain. It shows up when your heart aches at injustices others walk past without noticing. It appears when you sense someone's hidden pain, even before they confess it. That self still lives beneath every mask you learn to wear and every role you were forced to play. It has been observing your journey, experiencing every moment you pretend to be unaffected, every instance where you swallow your truth, every time you silence your own needs to protect the comfort of others. The abandoned self is not a ghost haunting you. It is a seed waiting for permission to grow. It watches patiently as you navigate a world that often misunderstands depth as weakness. It knows you didn't reject it out of malice or self-betrayal. You abandoned it because life demanded you adapt. You silenced your sensitivity because others misinterpreted it as fragility. You buried your intuition because your environment taught you to value logic over inner knowing. You detached from your emotions because you learned they made others uncomfortable. You gave up your natural openness because it left you vulnerable to those who exploited it. But the self you abandoned is not fragile. It is resilient. It is the oldest, wisest, most authentic part of you. It knows truths your conscious mind has forgotten. It remembers who you were before fear entered your vocabulary. It remembers a time when being yourself was not dangerous. And it has been waiting not for the world to change, but for you to recognize that you can no longer sacrifice yourself to survive. This self reveals itself in subtle ways. Sometimes it emerges as restlessness, as if something inside you is begging for a deeper life. Sometimes it comes as dissatisfaction, even in situations you once prayed for, because your soul knows there is more to you than what you are living. Sometimes it appears in sudden clarity during moments of silence, reminding you of dreams you abandoned, desires you suppressed, and boundaries you never dared to set. It can also rise in discomfort, an inner tension you feel when you act out of habit rather than authenticity. The abandoned self speaks through your fatigue with people, pleasing, your lack of tolerance for manipulation, your refusal to keep pretending. It arrives when you become emotionally exhausted from carrying burdens that were never yours. It calls out to you when you finally realize that peace built on self-betrayal is not peace at all. This buried part of you does not age the way your physical self does. While your body grows older, your abandoned self remains timeless. It is the version of you untouched by trauma, untouched by disappointment, untouched by the expectations of others. It is the purest expression of your essence, preserved beneath years of adaptation and self-defense. And even though you pushed it aside, it has been guiding you from the shadows. Every time you sensed someone's true intentions, that was it. Every time you felt called to protect your heart, even when your mind couldn't justify it, that was it. Every time you felt the need to walk away from environments that felt wrong, even if they looked right on the surface, that was it speaking to you, trying to lead you back to alignment. The abandoned self never dies because it is not something external you can discard. It is your inner blueprint, your original emotional intelligence, your raw truth, your unfiltered spirit. No matter how deeply you bury it, it finds ways to rise through intuition, dreams, sensations, synchronicities, and internal resistance. This part of you does not demand dramatic transformation. It simply waits for recognition. It wants you to notice when your soul pulls away from what drains you. It wants you to remember the passions you let sleep for too long. It wants you to reclaim your right to feel deeply without apologizing for it. It wants you to stop dimming your light to make others comfortable. It wants you to trust the feelings you were once taught to dismiss. Your abandoned self does not blame you for the years it spent in hiding. It understands the battles you faced, the environments that shaped you, the survival strategies you adopted. It knows you did what you had to do. But it also knows that survival is not the same as living. There was a time in your life when survival was not a choice. It was the only path available. You didn't wake up one day and decide to abandon your softness, your intuition, your openness, or your vulnerability. You were shaped by environments, relationships, and experiences that required you to build armor just to exist. You learned to read the room before you spoke, to anticipate emotional shifts before they happened, to hold your breath in moments when others seemed perfectly relaxed. You adapted because your surroundings left no space for who you truly were. And in doing so, a new version of you emerged, the one who could endure what your authentic self could not. This version was useful. It kept you safe. It kept you stable. It allowed you to move through dynamics that would have crushed your unprotected heart. But what you must understand is that this survival version of you, this hyper-aware, over-functioning, emotionally guarded self, was never meant to be permanent. It was a temporary identity built out of necessity, not truth. Survival mode is reactive. It doesn't ask what you want, it asks what will prevent further harm. It is the part of your psyche that scans for danger even when no danger is present. It's the instinct that makes you stay quiet instead of speaking up, apologize even when you are not wrong, overextend your energy in the hope of remaining safe, or detach emotionally so others cannot wound you. These responses were intelligent and adaptive in the past, but they were learned in environments that required you to forget your own needs. Survival mode teaches you to prioritize peace over authenticity, even if the peace is artificial. It teaches you to avoid conflict, even when avoiding it costs you your voice. It teaches you to give more than you receive, because withholding is safer than expressing. It teaches you to monitor others' emotional states more than your own, because predictability meant protection. Over time, these habits become familiar, automatic, and deeply internalized. You begin to believe that this guarded, hyper, vigilant version of you is who you truly are, but it isn't. It is the version of you the world forced you to become for a time, a mask that served a purpose, a shield that kept you from breaking, a strategy that helped you survive circumstances that were too heavy, too chaotic, or too unpredictable for your unfiltered self. You carried this identity because you needed it. Yet the very moment your soul begins to feel safe enough to breathe again, survival mode starts to crack from the inside out. Survival mode was never meant for seasons of peace. It was built for storms. That is why it feels so uncomfortable now. You are no longer standing in the places that required it, but the habits remain. You feel restless around calmness because you're still waiting for the next disruption. You feel undeserving of ease because struggle became familiar. You feel suspicious of kindness because you learned early on that warmth sometimes comes before betrayal. This tension inside you is not failure. It is the natural dismantling of a structure that no longer fits. Your spirit knows you're ready for more. It knows you're not supposed to live behind walls forever. It knows that constant self-protection is not the same as self-connection. You outgrew the environment that created your survival identity. The version of you that had to navigate chaos is still acting as if the chaos is present. It's as if your inner world kept running on an old map long after you entered new territory. But the truth is simple. What once kept you alive is now keeping you restricted. The armor that shielded your tenderness is now suffocating your growth. The hyper-awareness that protected you is now draining your energy. The emotional distance that prevented pain is now preventing intimacy. The silence that kept you safe is now keeping you unseen. You are not supposed to live this way forever. The temporary identity you formed was strong, but it was never the full expression of who you are. At some point, the soul begins to push for expansion. It starts whispering that it is time to step out of old patterns, to soften without fear, to trust without collapsing, to breathe without bracing for impact. This shift is not forced, it is organic. It is the natural evolution of a person who no longer needs protection as their primary mode of existence. The real you, the one beneath the learned defenses, starts resurfacing gently, almost silently. It emerges when you feel safe enough to rest, when you stop internalizing other people's storms, when you say no without guilt, when you stop over-explaining, when you begin to express desires, not just needs, when you allow yourself to feel without censoring your emotions. This is the moment where you realize you were never meant to remain the version of yourself that formed under pressure. That version kept you alive, but it was always a temporary identity, adopted until your soul found a safer place to unfold. Sensitivity is often misunderstood. In a world that prizes toughness, efficiency, and emotional restraint, those who feel deeply are often labeled as fragile, overreactive, or vulnerable. Yet sensitivity is not a flaw, it is a profound strength that has been misread by the world. From the earliest moments of life, your capacity to sense the subtle, to feel what others overlook, and to respond to emotions with care and nuance was a gift, not a liability. The world may have tried to teach you otherwise, but your sensitivity is your compass, your intelligence, and your deepest source of insight. Being sensitive means perceiving what others cannot. It means noticing the tension behind a smile, the pain hidden beneath a laugh, or the truth unspoken in someone's eyes. Sensitivity allows you to read spaces and people with a precision that those who ignore the inner world can never reach. It enables empathy, foresight, and creativity because it attunes you to nuances that others dismiss. While society often rewards the loud, the forceful, and the detached, your ability to feel deeply is what connects you to the subtle threads of life that hold everything together. Your sensitivity may have caused discomfort, both to yourself and to others when it was met with misunderstanding. People often mistake deep emotional perception for weakness because they cannot bear to confront their own vulnerability. They may have judged you for being too sensitive, or pressured you to harden, to numb, to detach. Perhaps you were told to stop caring so much, to lighten up, or to be less affected by the world. In these moments, it may have felt as if your very nature was wrong. You may have internalized the message that your gift was a burden, and you may have hidden it to survive. But hiding sensitivity does not diminish its power, it only postpones its expression. The part of you that feels deeply has always been resilient. Your emotions, intuition, and awareness have guided you through challenges, alerted you to danger, and helped you navigate complex social and emotional landscapes. Sensitivity is a kind of intelligence. It allows you to understand motivations, detect dishonesty, and sense energy shifts before they become visible. It teaches you compassion, patience, and the ability to respond rather than react. And these are qualities that build lasting relationships and inner strength. Sensitivity is not weakness because it requires courage to feel, to allow oneself to experience life fully, to embrace emotions without avoiding them, to face discomfort and uncertainty while remaining attuned to others is an act of bravery. Every time you listen, observe, or empathize, you practice a form of strength that is quiet yet unyielding. Unlike aggression or force, sensitivity moves with subtle power. It influences without demanding, understands without controlling, and heals without insisting. It allows for a depth of presence that cannot be achieved through toughness alone. Moreover, sensitivity is a bridge between the inner world and the outer world. It connects intuition with action, thought with feeling, and awareness with empathy. Through your sensitivity, you notice what is wrong, what is hidden, and what is possible. You see patterns where others see chaos, detect emotions where others see indifference, and recognize truth where others see illusion. This ability positions you to guide, support, and innovate in ways that go unnoticed by the superficial eye, yet are vital for authentic human connection and meaningful living. The challenge comes from a world that rarely honors sensitivity in the same way it honors dominance, speed, or authority. People may exploit, dismiss, or misunderstand it. You may have been conditioned to suppress it, to fit in, or to survive, and in doing so, you may have questioned your own value. Yet no matter how much you were pressured to harden, sensitivity persisted. It persisted in your intuition, in your subtle emotional reactions, in your dreams, and in your moments of quiet reflection. It persisted because it is intrinsic, not conditional. Your sensitivity has shaped your perception, your choices, and your relationships. It has helped you discern what aligns with your soul and what does not. It has taught you patience, introspection, and the ability to navigate complexity without losing your essence. It has preserved your capacity for empathy and understanding, even when the world seemed to penalize it. To embrace sensitivity is to reclaim authenticity, wisdom, and the power to live fully without apology. Sensitivity is not a limitation imposed upon you. It is the lens through which you understand the world more deeply, the heartbeat that keeps your compassion alive, and the spark that illuminates paths others cannot see. It is a gift that has survived misunderstanding, judgment, and attempts to suppress it, and it continues to guide your growth, resilience, and capacity for meaningful connection. Your sensitivity was never a weakness, When you begin the process of returning to yourself, the journey is really quiet. Reconnecting with your authentic self disrupts the patterns that were built around your absence, silence, or compromise. For years, you adapted to the expectations of others, conformed to roles that were convenient for them, and muted the parts of yourself that made you visible, powerful, and alive. In doing so, you became part of a network of dynamics, relationships, routines, and environments that thrived on your compliance. Your absence from your own center allowed these patterns to stabilize, but the moment you step back into yourself, the balance shifts and what was once steady begins to fracture. Returning to self is an act of reclamation. It means reclaiming your voice when it was silenced. It means reclaiming your desires when they were dismissed. It means reclaiming your time, energy, and emotional presence when they were constantly redirected to maintain harmony or placate others. This return is transformative because it realigns your life with your inner truth, rather than the expectations of the world around you. And whenever truth asserts itself in a system built on compromise, disruption is inevitable. The fracture begins subtly. You may notice that conversations feel different. People who once relied on your silence may react with discomfort or frustration. Those who thrived on your overextension may resist when you finally set boundaries. Some relationships that seemed unshakable may become tense, as if the invisible threads holding them together are suddenly taut and prone to snapping. This is not punishment, it is recalibration. It is the natural consequence of stepping into a version of yourself that the old dynamics cannot contain. Returning to self also exposes imbalance. You start to recognize patterns that previously went unnoticed, relationships that were one-sided, environments that drained you, friendships that required constant giving without reciprocity. These dynamics were sustainable only because you suppressed parts of yourself to maintain them. As you reassert your presence, your energy is no longer available to prop up dysfunction or accommodate unmet expectations. This withdrawal is often met with resistance, sometimes subtle, sometimes overt, because change is threatening to those invested in maintaining the status quo. Your internal shifts create external ripples. When you honor your boundaries, your priorities, and your emotional integrity, people around you are forced to adjust. Some will embrace your authenticity, inspired to reflect on their own lives. Others may feel unsettled, angered, or confused. These reactions are not a reflection of your failure. They are evidence that your return is genuine and that it is challenging patterns that were previously unquestioned. Change is uncomfortable because old dynamics, no matter how unhealthy, have a rhythm, and your self-reclamation interrupts that rhythm. Fracturing old dynamics is also a test of alignment. Not all connections are meant to survive your evolution, and that is part of the process. The relationships and circumstances that were once convenient for the survival version of you may no longer be compatible with the fully present, conscious self that is emerging. Does not make them wrong or evil. It simply highlights a mismatch between your emerging truth and the structures that once contained you. Recognizing this allows you to let go without bitterness, understanding that evolution is rarely symmetrical and that not everyone will grow at the same pace. The process is often accompanied by ambivalence. You may feel guilt, fear, or doubt when old relationships shift or when previously dependable structures falter. You may wonder if your return to self is selfish or destabilizing. Yet it is essential to understand that these feelings are not evidence of wrongdoing. They are the emotional echoes of systems resisting change. The discomfort you experience is not a signal to retreat. It is a signal that transformation is underway. Every boundary you enforce, every truth you speak, and every habit you shed contributes to a reconfiguration of your life that is aligned with your essence rather than external expectation. Returning to self is both liberation and upheaval. It restores your autonomy, strengthens your intuition, and clarifies your purpose. It reconnects you to your inner authority and invites you to live in a manner consistent with your values and desires. But liberation always comes at the cost of disruption, because the structures built on your absence were never meant to withstand the full force of your authenticity. In reclaiming your presence, you are simultaneously restoring balance to your inner world and challenging the equilibrium of your outer world. Fracturing old dynamics is not about creating conflict or seeking revenge. It is about integrity, alignment, and reclaiming the energy that was diverted to maintain roles and relationships that no longer serve you. It is about stepping into a life where your presence, voice, and truth are no longer negotiable, even if that means tension arises, expectations are unmet, or some connections dissolve. This is the natural consequence of living authentically in a world conditioned for compromise, and it signals the emergence of a self that refuses to remain hidden, silenced, or diminished. The breaking of old dynamics also carries a quiet form of liberation. As patterns dissolve, space is created, space for clarity, and for healthier relationships, and for opportunities aligned with your renewed sense of self. The fracture allows new structures to form, ones built on mutual respect, authenticity, and reciprocity. The energy you reclaim through this process becomes a force for creation rather than survival, allowing you to navigate life from a place of empowerment rather than reactivity. This return is gradual and deliberate. It is a reclamation of authority over your time, attention, and emotional investment. It is a conscious decision to no longer participate in systems that require your self-abandonment. As you step back into alignment with your inner truth, the old dynamics, by necessity, begin to crack, revealing their fragility and their dependence on your compliance. This fracture, while uncomfortable, is an inevitable sign that your return to self is real, potent, and uncompromising. When an empath begins to reclaim their true self, the effect rarely remains isolated. What may feel like an intensely personal journey is, in fact, part of a larger, subtle current that ripples through families, communities, and societies. The rebirth of the empath is not only an individual awakening, it is a collective shift. The sensitivity, awareness, and authenticity that the empath restores within themselves cannot remain contained. It radiates outward, influencing others and recalibrating the energy of the world around them. Empaths operate on frequencies often invisible to the majority, perceiving subtleties that others overlook. They absorb the emotions of those around them, mirror the unspoken tensions of groups, and intuit the underlying currents that shape interactions. This heightened awareness has historically demanded compromise. To survive, the empath learn to quiet themselves, to dim their light, and to adapt their energy to maintain harmony and avoid conflict. Yet, when the empath returns to their authentic self, these dormant gifts awaken with renewed clarity. The reclamation of their own emotional and spiritual sovereignty triggers a chain reaction, challenging not only internal patterns, but also the relational and social structures that depend on their self-abandonment. The empath's rebirth carries with it an expanded perception of truth, where once they may have bent to expectations or absorbed the judgments of others, they now move with the guidance of their own inner compass. This shift is subtle but undeniable. People around them sense it, even if they cannot articulate it. The atmosphere changes, conversations carry more honesty, spaces feel more alive, and interactions begin to reflect a deeper level of integrity. The empath's presence acts as a mirror, reflecting not only their own authenticity, but also the potential for authenticity in others. Collective shifts occur because empaths are inherently connective beings. Their sensitivity allows them to perceive hidden dynamics, emotional imbalances, and systemic injustices that others miss. When they reclaim their full presence, they no longer unconsciously absorb or accommodate dysfunction. They no longer maintain illusions for the comfort of those who fear disruption. Instead, they begin to embody clarity, discernment, and emotional intelligence. As a result, the people and systems around them are confronted with the truth of imbalance. Relationships that relied on the empath's compliance are challenged. Groups that depended on their emotional labor must now adapt. This disruption, while uncomfortable, is an essential part of the collective realignment. The rebirth of the empath also serves as a catalyst for others to awaken. Witnessing someone step into authenticity, honor their boundaries, and move with self-awareness can inspire those who have long ignored their own emotional depth. Empaths, by their nature, radiate influence. Their courage in reclaiming sensitivity, intuition, and vulnerability illuminates possibilities for others who may have suppressed these traits. Communities begin to shift, not because of force or persuasion, but because the empath's presence provides a living example of what it means to integrate inner truth with outer life. This collective shift is not limited to interpersonal relationships. It extends to cultural and systemic awareness. Empaths who embrace their rebirth often notice patterns in society that demand collective attention: inequality, environmental neglect, emotional suppression, or lack of empathy in leadership. Their heightened perception and restored clarity allow them to act as agents of subtle change, influencing decisions, raising awareness, and fostering empathy on a broader scale. By reclaiming their own power, empaths contribute to a cultural recalibration, reminding society that emotional intelligence and sensitivity are not weaknesses, but essential components of collective health. The rebirth process is also an invitation to collaboration. As empaths step into authenticity, they attract others who resonate with integrity, intuition, and emotional awareness. Networks of conscious individuals form, supporting one another in sustaining these higher frequencies of presence. These networks amplify the collective impact, creating spaces where sensitivity is celebrated, insight is honored, and authenticity becomes the standard rather than the exception. The empath's courage to return to self-validates others' journeys, fostering environments where emotional depth and intuitive intelligence can flourish. Importantly, the collective shift initiated by the empath's rebirth is gradual. It does not happen overnight, nor does it rely on coercion or judgment. It manifests through subtle realignments in energy, through the recalibration of relationships, and through the quiet modeling of integrity and presence. It challenges outdated systems that relied on compliance and suppression while inviting new ways of being that prioritize emotional intelligence, awareness, and interconnectedness. The rebirth of the empath also encourages reflection on personal responsibility within the collective. As empaths reclaim their own authority over emotional boundaries, they demonstrate that collective health depends on individuals who can feel deeply without losing themselves. They reveal that true influence does not require domination, but clarity, presence, and discernment. By embodying this model, empaths create a ripple effect that inspires conscious engagement, empathy, and alignment across communities and organizations. In essence, the empath's rebirth is a subtle revolution. It signals the return of depth, awareness, and sensitivity to a world that often undervalues these qualities. As the empath steps fully into their truth, they catalyze change in the energies around them, challenging old assumptions, realigning relationships, and awakening those ready to remember the value of emotional intelligence. Their emergence is not merely personal, it is a contribution to a larger awakening, a reminder that transformation at the individual level inevitably influences the collective, weaving new patterns of consciousness, empathy, and integrity into the world.